Yeah. So there's got to be some frustration with you, and I've heard this with someone else as well. When you are an expert in your field, and yet the recognized expert testimony is, in this instance, Dr. Alyssa Sherry, produces stuff that is garbage, and the opposing side uses it. And yet, as we mentioned last time, in front of the, they recognize you as being the expert. But in court, you're silenced to some degree.
Well, I think, that's a good point, because in court, I'm a parent,
right?
And we know that based on statistics that hasn't been deconstructed fully, that the fathers are mostly the ones that are the non-custodial parents. The fathers are the ones that are usually minimized.
Right.
We know the literature recognizes that, the scientific literature, and we know what the literature by the experts, which, by the way, Alyssa Sherry is not referred to as an expert in any of the literature related to parental alienation or shared parenting. But the experts that are recognized, like Dr. Warshak, Fabricius, Kruk, Nielsen, and several others on other parts of the world, recognize that shared parenting is what provides optimal care for children. Now, coming from my field, now, not as a father in court, but outside of court, considered as an expert, in encountering, doing what I do day by day by day, and then encountering the legal family system, well, of course, there's a contrast.
Yeah.
Of course I don't agree.
Yeah.
And I think the big struggle is that people aren't agreeing. And I don't think it's that we are we're not in contempt of the position of the court. I think that we are opposed to the decision making that affects the children of families.
You can speak personally on this, but
looking at federal case law, looking at upper court case law, the appellate, the Texas Supreme Court, there's many disagreements with what the upper courts state compared to what the lower courts are doing.
Right.
And just by reading the case law, my infancy of knowledge. But going back, I think another strong point is you can talk with these experts, and none of them will say, well, I'll testify, with the legislature about the importance,
right?
Because they don't want to. They don't want to put themselves.
Yeah.
We asked Dr. Warshak, and he's like, no, I don't want to potentially jeopardize my neutrality in my research by advocating one thing over another to the legislature, and many of them won't. Fabricius did, and he was discarded by the JJFI during the last session. Here you have this expert. He's a world expert, okay?
Yeah.
Of early child attachment, okay,
Yeah.
and child overnights, okay?
Yeah.
He gets less than 2 minutes, and what does the JJFI chairman do? Just discards him, okay?
Yeah.
As if he's nothing, all right? And really, they should have felt privileged
to have
that he was in there
I know.
of that scientific knowledge, of that caliber, and then just have listened to him.
Yeah.
I think it was poor judgment.
Well, you make a very important point, though, because the JJFI, the Texas Family Law Foundation, all of these different people, they act together in sync a lot of times. And at least because the Texas Family Law Foundation, they are the divorce attorney lobbyists, and they have influence. They're going to be the experts and stuff like that. But they want hired guns. They don't want objective people to come in that will tell, here's what the research shows. Because the research would completely decimate their industry. And so they have to get hired guns. They have to get Judge Judith Wells, who's considered by many people to be one of the worst judges in the state of Texas, to come and testify about the issue of judicial discretion. They've got to get different attorneys that will testify to what the TFLF wants them to say. They are hired guns. by and large, in my opinion. I haven't seen all the documentation.
Well, I can remember one time in one of the hearings, opposing counsel Marshall Thompson advertised this to the judge, Catherine Mousy. And at the time, I was represented by the attorney Ben Beveridge. You know, so Marshall Thompson says that myself and Ben Beveridge are card-carrying members of the Texas Fathers' Rights movement, right in front of Catherine Mousy. At the time, I didn't know that Catherine Mousy had previously been a family law attorney in practice in the Austin area for over a decade, and also at the time, I didn't realize she was also a member of the Texas Family Law Foundation.
Yeah.
So, in the hearing, I'm like, what in the world was that? Because it was definitely a false statement.
Yeah.
I'm not a member of the Texas Fathers' Rights movement. I'm an independent advocate for the welfare of children. I've testified to the legislature to that effect. Basically, I've testified about the research.
Yeah.
And so at the time, Ben Beveridge was shocked, but we could definitely tell a change in her demeanor. And of course, in the latter part of the hearing, despite evidence that was submitted, her rulings didn't even match the evidence submitted. And she was actually prompted to issue sanctions by Marshall Thompson. After she initially said, I'm not going to award sanctions, and Marshall Thompson said, yes, but are you going to award sanctions? And he said, oh, I'll award sanctions,
Yeah.
So
and she was also later recused.
Yeah, she was later recused at
because
December
of her bias
2nd.
or something like that.
Yeah, due to bias on December 2nd, 21. And then, so, we subsequently found out that Alyssa Sherry had done 9 separate cases with Catherine Mousy, while Catherine Mousy was a family law attorney, before she became a judge. And so, if you're going to collaborate with an attorney on one case, while you're in child custody about it, that's a lot of communication.
Right.
Okay.
What do you
if
want
you're
me to
going to do
write,
9 separate times, that is building a history of communication.
Yeah.
So it can bring into question, was there a pre-existing relationship
absolutely
that influenced the evaluation? Because right after we had her recused, then it was another 6 weeks before the report was released.
Right. Right.
And Marshall Thompson's a member of the Texas Family Law Foundation. So was his partner, Carlos Salinas,
I saw him
who
yesterday,
actually
too.
was yesterday there testifying at the JJFI about protective orders, sitting next to Steve President.
No, Amy Breslin.
Excuse me, Amy Breslin.
Amy Breslin, yeah.
So, there's a lot of questions, and I think it was in 2017 at the tail end of that session that I became involved with advocacy for kids as an independent expert. And then, let's see, the following session I testified to the research with the JDFI, and then a session after that I testified. And then subsequent to that, Alyssa Sherry testified.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting how she testified. But, that leads to the question, was there pre-existing bias? Because she testified against the shared parenting bill. And I was testifying for the shared parenting bill along with other people.
Yeah.
So at that point, should that have brought into question the bias?
Yeah.
Or did we naively think that this expert involved in a case could separate it out?
Yeah.
But when she says no parent's entitled to 50-50, based on what law, what facts can you say that? Because that goes against the United States Constitution, that goes against rulings in the Texas Supreme Court, that goes against just natural parent-child attachment theory, that goes against the scientific literature.
Yeah.
And then when she advocates in the report and congratulates one party for winning a long battle, okay?
Yeah.
Based on her report, assuming that her report is valid and will be the key thing that will help her win a battle, or that will help one party win a battle, I think that's an indicator of bias, because in the Texas Family Code and the Texas Administrative Code, it clearly states, even in her agreement paperwork, clearly states that she's not to be, a forensic evaluator is not to be an advocate for one party, okay? Because then that automatically eliminates neutrality. And if you're relatively an advocate, then you're an adversary for the other party.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.